Great. Well, I'm really pleased, Avrohom, you've come on to our little chat show here. We very fondantly call Neville's Corner. So this is Ask the CEO meets Neville's Corner. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about who you are and what you are, because it's going to come out during our conversation. But just to all of our audience out there, young or old, parent, student, or employer, please go onto YouTube and just lock into Ask the CEO, because there's some fantastic interviews out there. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, point to it. It's Ask the CEO. There it is. Hashtag Ask the CEO. Avrohom gets into some incredibly interesting arenas, and part of those are going to come out today. But let's get into the first question here. So, Avrohom, you're a guy that's moved from corporate life into being a solopreneur, as we call them. So what do you see are the biggest challenges to business today?
Yeah, so first of all, Neville, thank you for having me on your show. It's a real honor, and I admire the work that you do with young people. I myself was once young, and I would have.
You still are.
I still am. And we'll talk about my history, where I came from. But had we had this 20 years ago, I would have been in a much different place, much farther along. So, to answer your question, strangely enough, I think a major problem that businesses face nowadays is a lack of people. A lack of resources. Although I hate the term resources, human resources, It sounds like so antiseptic.
There's a resource. That's a resource.
Yeah, right. We've got a broom. We've got a pen, and we've got a human, right? I hate that term, but I see it as a lack of people, and I said strangely enough because, on the one hand, we're lacking people, as is evidenced by the 0% unemployment rate in technology sectors such as cybersecurity, where we have a job vacancy of 3.5 million jobs, and that's just going up. We're throwing more devices out there. Cyber attacks are getting worse, especially now during the global mess that we're in. We need people. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, we're getting rid of people who we deem outdated, or their skills are outdated due to the wave of digital transformation that swept across every industry in the world. Now, according to a report from CNBC last year in 2019, they said that 25% of 25% of jobs in the United States are at risk for automation. So if you think about that, 25% of people are going to be losing their jobs in the near future. So on the one hand, we've got these huge vacancies. We're looking for people. We don't see them. Like, where are these people? On the other hand, we're getting rid of good people. We're hiring new people, or looking to hire people, which costs money. And then let's face it, there's a risk involved. You don't know who you're getting until you've been with them for a while. So until they've worked in the company for, say, 6 months, you don't even know who you're getting. So wouldn't it make more sense to invest in upskilling existing employees, especially older people who are the most loyal people you'll ever work with? This will definitely put a major dent in vacancies. It'll solve a critical business need. It'll keep good, loyal people employed and providing for their families. So I think, there are lots of issues that businesses struggle with, but I think that this one, the lack of people, is a real problem in businesses.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, there was no preempting to you answering that question. As everyone knows, this is really coming from you. And we see it all over the world. We see lots of really good people being let go because they're out of date, let's say, being polite. And I would be one of those that are out of date. I'm 61 years old, so I would be 15 years past my sell-by date, really. And then we talk about upskilling and reskilling, but we never do it. So I think it's a fascinating arena that if businesses started to perhaps think differently, then they may get farther forward much quicker, especially
For
in
sure.
these sort of, I'm going to use the term, unprecedented times, which we've probably heard about 15 times a day, but more than we ever want to hear again. But let's talk now about when businesses. Let's just assume that this businesses are going to go on this growth spurt. What are they going to be looking for when they hire a new employee?
So I can tell you what I look for. Doesn't necessarily equate to what people are actually looking for, but I can tell you what they should look for. So when I look to hire an employee, I look for two critical attributes in their profile: attitude and skills, and in that order. And believe it or not, job-specific skills are not a deal breaker. As long as that person has that can-do attitude, a positive mindset, they admit what they don't know, but they're willing to put in the work to learn how to do the job. And they also possess the skills necessary to perform the job once they learn how. I'm willing to invest that time and energy and money, whatever it takes, to train that person, because you're not going to get a better person than this. Case in point from my own experience, I once interviewed for a job, and I said the exact same thing. I told my prospective boss, look, I don't know a thing about this product, but I will own it. I will put in whatever effort, whatever time it takes on my personal time. I will learn it, and I will become the subject matter expert. And he said, I'll tell you something, nobody knows this product. So that's exactly what he was looking for.
Including him.
And sure enough, I was hired on the spot and I excelled. And not only that, but that became one of my core products that I delivered in my telecom consulting business. So when I went out on my own, I took that skill with me. And so talking about my business, I actually did the same thing when I hired someone. So my young fledgling consulting business, and in a small business, people wear multiple hats and everybody does many different things. I was looking to hire somebody to help with customer support and a myriad of other tasks. Ranging from executive vice president to administrative assistant.
Oh, yeah, we've all got those business cards.
So, I interviewed this woman, and she was an administrative assistant, which I was also looking for, but she didn't know telecom at all, and I didn't expect her to. And in fact, her exact words to me were, I don't know telecom, but I'm willing to learn whatever you need me to. And that was the person I was looking for. I hired her on the spot. I said, that's it. This is the person I'm looking for. And sure enough, she became a star in no time. I remember this particular story that really sticks out in my mind. I was at a meeting, and then my phone just starts buzzing like crazy. We've all been there when all hell breaks loose. I didn't want to divert my attention from the meeting, but I had to excuse myself. And, I go out, I get my bearings, take out the phone, and sure enough, a customer is having a service affecting issue, but I see that my assistant is handling it. So I decide I'm going to let her do her job. As long as she's not trying to pull me in, she doesn't need me, she's handling it. I'll let her do her job. I'll have faith in her. And I went back to my meeting. When I was done, I took out my phone again, and sure enough, she facilitated communication between the customer and a team of engineers in India. She directed them as to what corrective course of action to take. They fixed the problem, customers happy, and all this happened during my meeting.
Fantastic.
I was so proud of her. I mean, it was a very proud moment. And I felt good because I trusted my intuition, and she rose to the occasion. So when it comes to what criteria to search for when looking for someone, I would place attitude right there on the top.
Well, you may not have believed that you think like lots of other people, but sadly, you fit right into that equation, because a lot of recruiters would say that's what they look for first. The interesting thing for me is, how do you work out that from a CV? Now, let's not answer that question, because that's probably quite detailed and
Yeah, that opens up a whole nother can of worms.
a whole new can of worms. We can probably spend another day on that one. So let's leave that to one side. So now let's go back about, and we were talking about any employee there, but now let's talk about the young employees, tomorrow's leaders, the people that you're going to be recruiting to be the person that takes on your business and drives you out of a job, because that's the type of guy you are, because you don't want to be doing the mundane stuff. You want someone else to learn their ropes, and so that you can get on to bigger and better things. And that's how companies grow. They released some of the opportunity, if you like, for younger people to come on board. But the question I've got for you is, people call these young people millennials. I don't like tags, as you've probably heard me say in the past, but millennials seems to have sort of stuck around for a little while. So these youngish people, do you think we're giving them the tools so that they can succeed?
That's a very interesting question, because it depends on who the we is, right? I mean, is it the schools, the parents, the community, maybe the industry leaders, or dare I say elected officials, although that's going to open up a whole can of worms. We're not going to go there.
Yeah, let's not get into politics.
I like the way you phrased the question, though, about the term millennials, the tag. I don't think that's necessarily a millennial question. I think this is something we need to ask ourselves in every generation.
Yeah.
I believe that the responsibility for educating and equipping our young people starts at home. First and foremost, it's a parent's responsibility to care for children, and at every age, that care is different. A newborn needs to be fed, every few hours, and a diaper change. A 2-year-old needs solid food and to be entertained. A 5-year-old learns ABCs. 10-year-old has other responsibilities or other needs. Being or becoming self-sufficient is a responsibility that's incumbent on the parents. That's my belief, and that's how I raise my children. It's my responsibility to ensure that my millennial children and Gen Z children have the tools that they need. Doesn't mean they're going to use those tools. That's a different conversation. But parents influence and lead their children to pick those right resources to help them get what they need to become self-sufficient and successful in life, be it colleges, business school, or maybe slaving away at the family business. It's a very individual situation. So I think the answer is really a mixed bag. I don't think there's a yes or no answer per se. It's really more about, the specific situation, or, are we as parents, and then the resources that make themselves available, are these resources geared towards helping people become successful? So don't really have an answer. I guess I have more questions.
Well, and half the problem here is we've always got lots of questions, because the funny thing is, if we'd have got it right, we'd have been able to pass it on to everybody so that everyone's successful. But clearly, and I quite agree with you, it starts at home, but then of course the education department gets involved. We spend 14 years roughly in the Western world going to school. But you said something very much about when you hire a new employee, what are you looking for? Do we have an exam called attitude?
Right.
Or do we have an exam that's called negotiation skills at school? I'm talking about.
Oh gosh, yeah. It's more academic.
Incredibly so. That's back to the CV, because the CV for these young people tends to be very much focused on the academics. So you can't really see attitude jumping out of a CV. You might see a few leadership type skills that they've done, but attitude, you've got to look into their face and and ask the question, you know. So let's just delve a little bit into education. You know, we do, as I say, we do approximately 14 years, but in your development, and I'm talking about at school, and you're a religious guy, you know, so you've had another part of your education, which is not through the government, it's through private type of education, religious education, just like myself, you know, come through the Christian community. But in school, did you really learn things that would stead you in really good stead going forward?
So I guess some yes, some no. You know, in the religious schools focus on values. You know, there's also education involved. I would say those values really had me, you know, put me in a good standing, or equip me with the tools with regards to attitude and just the way about approaching life. And the same for my children. The schools that I picked for them, you know, give them the same thing. But there are different things that a person needs. So there's that being self-sufficient, being able to support yourself. And attitude plays a big role. So I'll give you an example. I went to a yeshiva, a religious Jewish school, and I went to college, and I did it at the same time. So to give you an idea of what my day was like when I was 17, I started my day at 9:30, and that went till 5 p.m. That was my religious school. I had an hour break for dinner, which was more like 10 minutes, because till I got home, ate something, got my books, and then went to the other school, which was the college. You know, I had a few minutes to wolf down some food, and then I was in college till 10:30 at night. And then, you know, comes homework, and, you know, you still need to keep up with it. My advantage was at the time was that I took ownership of my life. So I started my career as a computer programmer. That's what helps me with all the techie talk. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I loved tinkering with computers. I loved programming it. You know, I enjoyed that challenge of making things work. So when I went to college, from day one, my focus was on getting a degree in computer programming so that I can have the requisite knowledge to succeed in that career. So that mindset, that attitude, that helped me along throughout my education. One of my peers, and, you know, I'm just going to pick a generic peer, right?
Yep.
Attends the same yeshiva as me, the same classes as me. We have the same schedule, but he might not come out ready to take on the world when he leaves school, because many of my peers majored in undecided, you know, at least the first few years. So, you know, again, we have the school, the education that needs to provide the tools. My college provided those tools. It was a good college. There are the parents that influenced that decision, and there's the attitude. You know, what are you going to do with yourself? Who's going to provide you? You know, you need to take that ownership and make things happen. So, and again, that goes back to that question, the previous question, you know, are we providing young ones with the tools they need? It's really a very complex question because the young ones have to also want to succeed. And I'm sure many of them do, but that's a very critical factor in the equation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you use this word about taking ownership. You know, I sort of like you know, I was in the Scouts as well as having this religious arm and also education, and happened to be pretty good at sports, so I understood teamwork as well. And interestingly enough, the Scouting motto is "Be prepared," which probably a lot of people could be could be quite useful in the COVID arena. But it was that taking ownership. It was literally volunteer for everything, get out there and really focus on where you want to go. So try and understand where you want to be going, the general route you want to be going, even if you're not sure on exactly where you want to be. But I think it now sort of steps back into, if you were, and I sort of know some of this answer already. If you were that 20-year-old, you know, alongside other 20-year-olds, and you were given an opportunity to stand up in front of all of your classmates, you know, across the whole college or university, what would you say? Would you say what you've just said to yourself? Or would you say something slightly different?
To be young again.
Yeah, that brings up happy memories. So see, listen, you're only as young as, you know, my brain says I'm 18. My heart, unfortunately, says I'm actually nearer 60. So there you go. Take it easy. But
yeah, so, you know, of course, you know, I don't think I'd have to give myself that specific advice because I was already practicing that at the time. But not to sound cliche, I would advise my younger self to focus on building a network. And that's why I preface it with not to sound cliche, because you hear it all over. But here's the thing. I wouldn't have understood what that means. You know, so besides just saying, focus on building your network, I would also explain why and how.
Yeah.
Two big elements there. When I was in my 20s, I naively believed that if you focus on your job and you deliver excellence, you'll be financially secure. I mean, that was the paradigm of the 90s. You know, we talked about schools, right? And, you know, we spent so many years in the education system. My college provided me with job skills, the skills I needed to perform my job. However, the paradigm back then was you go to school, you learn skills, you get a job, you do well, you know, as long as you have a good mindset and attitude, you're secure. You know, you work for 40 years, you retire, and so on and so on. Like, you know, life is good. There is some truth to that. I mean, look, if you don't have a positive mindset or attitude, you're not going to get far no matter what. But the notion that you can get fired, reassigned, or your salary cut through no fault of your own was foreign to me. It just didn't enter my mind.
Yeah.
So, you know, so when it finally did happen at different intervals in my early career, I was shocked. I couldn't believe what's happening. You know, how could this happen? I mean, I followed everything that I was taught, and it made me question all my beliefs about career that I've been indoctrinated with. You know, is this the way to go? Do you need a job? You know, maybe I can make a living some other way. Entrepreneurship was not cool in the 90s as it is today. So back then, that was a big step. So, you know, these feelings of unease started to percolate within me. It took a few years. I think like that final straw was when I did great at my job, and I even got an award for, you know, at that time I was a sales engineer, and I got an award for making like 103% of my quota. They sent me to Barcelona and to London, and, you know, they rolled out the red car. You know, people had money to spend in those days.
Yeah, life is good. Life is really good.
Life was good in those. That world is gone. I feel bad for today's young people. You will never know those pleasures.
Maybe.
So, you know, and then the next year, not even a year later, a few months later, I get a phone call from my boss, tell me what a great job I'm doing, but I'm really sorry. We're moving to what's called market-based pay, which means that we're not going to pay any more than our competition pays. So you can't quit if you wanted to, because where are you going to go? You know,
that's motivation for you. That's real motivation for you. Yeah.
That was a slap in the face. That was the, you know, I mean, I already went through getting fired. I already, again, being fired, not because I did a bad job, but because they were just, you know, shuffling departments around and things like that. I got, you know, reassigned to different group. There was 1 year that I had 5 jobs in 1 year. Like every month or 2 months, I would get a new job and move to the next one. It was an interesting time. But, you know, like that was the last straw. You know, I thought that this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I was happy. I was content. I didn't need anything more. And then I was slapped in the face. So it took a few years for me to muster up the courage. But I finally, in 2006, I finally left corporate America for entrepreneurship. And I must say that was something I was totally not prepared for. I did not know anything about entrepreneurship. And to make matters worse, I was actually successful at first. And, you know, that actually wasn't necessarily a good thing, because I didn't know what hit me when things went bad. Right? So, you know, I was talented, I was highly skilled, I had a positive attitude, and most important of all, I had a large network that I built subconsciously over the years that I was employed. And that was really my kryptonite. Because it was subconscious, it wasn't intentional. It was just something, you know, I'm a personable guy. I make friends. So all the people that I interacted with, they were in my network. And I had a large network in telecom. So for many years, that business went very well. I made a lot of money. I was hiring people, and business was great. And like everything else in life, that came to an end. Just like every other industry was being disrupted, telecom was disrupted. And I got hit really hard. I mean, you could do a great job, but when your customers don't have money to spend with you, you're not going to be in business. It's as simple as that. So for the first time and I thought, you know, I prided myself at being financially responsible. I had no debt. I had some money in savings. You know, I was in a good place. And for the first time in my life, I was not just in debt, I was deep in debt. I was horrified by the fact that no matter how skilled I was, no matter how talented I was, no matter how charming I was, I couldn't do anything to stop that train wreck. I was totally powerless. I was just shocked. I didn't know what to do. You know, of course you have, I'm sure you can relate, you know, all the village wise men telling me, oh, well, you should do this and you should do that. And you're not doing this right. You know, all that. But I knew in my heart that, you know, this is just not right. You know, maybe their advice might even have been correct for someone else, but for me, that was not. I just knew, my intuition told me that this is not really where I want to go. So I started searching for answers, and thankfully, we were already living in the age of the internet. And I must say that today's young people are blessed. that you have the internet. Had this disruption taken place 10 years prior to that, I might not have recovered the way I did. And even so, the recovery took many years. It wasn't overnight. I'm not even going to start with, all my trials and tribulations and just that mental ups and downs and, everything that entrepreneurs go through when things aren't going well. So I started leveraging the resource that was available to me, which was the internet, to educate myself in, all right, obviously I didn't do a good job. Maybe I did do a good job, but my industry is gone. Where do I go from here? I started educating myself and I learned about networking and what a network really is. And actually, I would say probably my biggest education came from joining a group called BNI. BNI is a global professional business networking group. They're called BNI, Business Networking International, and they're everywhere. I mean, just look them up. They're probably right down the block from you. What it entails, a group of people meet once a week, usually for breakfast, and we discuss the latest updates in our businesses, and we try to find each other leads and help each other with the business. And their motto is givers gain, which basically means that you do something nice for someone, they're going to want to do something nice back for you. I mean, call it karma, quid pro quo, or maybe just the basic human instinct of reciprocity. You do something nice for someone, they're going to feel almost obligated to do something nice back for you. So once I learned that a network is important, you need to have people. You can't do business in a vacuum. It's not like a job where you get a job, you put on your blinders, especially in the tech world. I love that part about being a techie. You sit in your basement and, your computer, I didn't have to eat for days. I didn't know what day, it was wonderful. I loved it. But business is not like that. You need people. And you shouldn't think of a network as, all right, the word leverage is such a bad word because that entails, it means, or I should say it implies that what can I take from that person? But it's not like that. It's like a friendship. Why is someone your friend? Because, they like you. Why do they like you? Well, you're a nice person. You're a nice guy. You're a nice gal. You do nice things. And that's really what a business network is about. Your friends. You share a friendship. You show them that you care about them. You do things for them and don't want to do things for you. And that's kind of how it works. I'm oversimplifying it, but in essence, that's what it is. So again, that came naturally to me. So once I learned that that's what you got to do, then that's what I focused on. And it took many years, but here I am. That's basically it in a nutshell. So if I can go back and mentor myself, so I'm speaking to young people right now, I would mentor myself to really focus on building and expanding a network and having people that you interact with, because it's these people that will be with you throughout the good times and the bad times.
Yeah, Avrohom, I could see that was really from the heart. So thank you for that. Our experiences make us who we are. Just picking up on BNI, it's probably one of the best networking groups I've ever met. I actually was introduced to them when I lived in Connecticut in 1990, before you were born, and not quite, but whatever. And Givers Gain was such a lovely way of putting it, really, because as humans, our natural instinct is to give. Can I help you? What's your problem? I did that. It didn't quite work for me, but maybe you can have a go and see if it works for you. So we are all this thought of being an entrepreneur and protecting your intellectual property. Um, you know, it's almost out of the window, really.
That
Just
whole paradigm, the silo paradigm,
exactly.
gone.
It has gone, and I just think back to if only our teachers knew that.
Yeah.
So you talked a little about the paradigm. I call it the contract, the education contract, where your parent and you go into the first day of your secondary school and you sit down with a teacher and they write a contract that says everything apart from get a good degree, get a good job. But it's implied. Get academically qualified. You know, I went to a grammar school and I was told, once you've gone to grammar school, absolutely no problem. You have a job for life. Well, of course, that was 45 years ago, 47 years ago, probably. And at that time, you got a job for life.
Yeah.
You know, when
That
I
was
came out of
paradigm.
university, exactly, the paradigm was blown. You know, as you said, one year you had 5 jobs, you know, not by design, but you also mentioned the word, you had the right attitude to get yourself out of the hole. And that's where we all need to be today. You know, this coronavirus has really flipped the axis. If anything has shifted the world's axis, this virus has done it. You know, 2 world wars hasn't, in many respects. This virus has done it to everybody, and we're all fighting the same enemy. So I've really enjoyed you being on the show today. What I'd like you to do, though, is I like to leave people with some tea time tips. You know, TTT, something that can they can just remember as part of this conversation. So, have you got 3 tea time tips, just simple ones that you'd like to leave people with?
So I would say 2 out of 3 we covered.
Yeah.
One, you know, just to recap, ownership. So just remember in one word, ownership and network. So we got that.
Yeah.
And then the third one, is something that I actually advise older people actually everybody, when, you know, many times I'm up on stage and talk about the latest innovations in technology. And inevitably a question is going to come up. And we started the conversation with this. Oh, you know, this disruption is something that happens all the time. And like it or not, we're going to be seeing it even more because that cycle of innovation is happening faster. You know, so what's going to be with my career, with my job? You know, we have a 25% risk of being automated today, but next year it's going to be even higher. And then the ones that became automated, they'll find something else and become automated again. Mm-hmm. So, you know, how do we get out of that rat race?
Yeah.
And many people are scared, especially older people that have already been through it. You know, they're in their 50s or older. They have families they need to support. They don't have any retirement savings because the whole economy just, you know, went to hell. What do we do? So here is my advice. And again, you know, you've had a chance to hear my story. So I take this from my experience. This is how I live my life. This is how I reinvented myself. Every person possesses a uniqueness. We as human beings are unique. You know, like you have 2 snowflakes, no 2 snowflakes are alike. Not that we're snowflakes or flaky. But we each are unique. Now, what that uniqueness is, we need to explore that within ourselves. And just like, you know, maybe with me, it took longer. Maybe I'm just slower than the average person, but it's not going to happen overnight. So you can't like snap your fingers and say, well, all right, I got fired from my job today. I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes and I'll start a business and rock and roll. This is more of a habit because guess what? You're going to reinvent yourself and disruption is going to happen again. I have no doubt that the business that I'm in is going to change. It's the only thing that doesn't change is change, right? We've all heard that cliche. But it's more of a habit of looking inside yourself and recognizing what that uniqueness is that cannot be disrupted. Simon Sinek is very fond of saying you can copy what people do, but you can't copy why they do it. And in essence, it's the same thing. People might copy what I do, but they can't copy me. You know, they could try to copy, you know, do the same thing, but like you said, right? Other people don't have that same touch that I have because that's me. And how did I get to where I am? I had to take a hard look at myself. You know, keep in mind, a few years ago, before I started this business, I felt like a failure. And many people who are entrepreneurs that have gone through very difficult times can relate to that. I did something, it didn't work out. I tried other things. I fell flat on my face. I had debts that were mounting. I have children. I have a mortgage, you know, just like everybody else, we all have expenses and money flows out faster than it flows in. And what's going on? I had to take a hard look at myself and I said, all right, this industry ain't happening. Where can I go? You know, what can I do? And I was thinking, well, if I'm going to get a job or even start a business, I mean, everything requires some kind of skill, some kind of talent. So I knew that number one, I'm a techie. I love technology. I always love playing with technology toys. Okay, so that's something I can do, something in the technology sector. Then I have a skill that I'm very articulate. I had many different jobs in my career, ranging from computer programmer to sales engineer and everything in between. I used to give executive briefings to high profile clients and help close sales. And I was able to give a presentation where I spoke to CEOs and minions, for lack of a better word, at the same time. And I had to make sure that the CEO doesn't feel stupid by the techno jargon, but the minions had the information they needed to do their job. So this was a skill that I developed, and maybe I had some intrinsic skill, which was just further developed at the time. But that is something that I can do. What do I enjoy doing? Well, I enjoy speaking to people. You know, it's what we're doing right now. I love it. I love being in person, you know, meeting people in person even more. That might take a while, you know, hopefully not 2 to 3 years. But video conferencing is the next best thing. And video conferencing is very cheap, easy to get started. You know, you invest in a little studio like I have and you get going. Okay, well, that was sort of like my triangle. You know, what do I like to do? What am I good at? And most important of all, what can I do between those two things that can bring value to people? And that's that third part of the equation. And that's how Ask the CEO was born. So what each of us must do is that we need to look inside ourselves to leverage that uniqueness within us and figure out how to use that to deliver massive value to people. You do that, you're not going to be disrupted, and you will be able to weather any storm that's out there.
Absolutely beautiful. 3 cracking tea time tips for anyone to take on. And the interesting thing is, they're all in our control.
Yes.
We can all do it. And all we've got to do is just apply ourselves with the right attitude. I'm going to give a 4th tea time tip today. And we've already said it, but when you're listening, guys, get onto YouTube. Look on Ask the CEO, because that actually is going to take you into a whole new world. That's it. Let's point a finger. A whole new world of what's happening out there. And the nice thing about Ask the CEO, and I've said this to Avrohom many times, is that people he's got on there are practitioners. These aren't just experts that sit in the back cave like you did with your PC and just taking it apart, not in the real world. These are experts in the real world. They live it, they breathe it. If they get it wrong, they change it. And that's what is really appealing by Ask the CEO, because even when you ask them a tough question, you can see they haven't really got an answer, but they're working out with you because they're trying to find out, what the problem is. That's when you found out that you've got a really good practitioner in front of you. These are great experts, coaches, mentors, and they just happen to be fairly senior in their organization. So they've been around the corner a bit. So that's my fourth tea time tip. And lastly, a big thank you. We're 5 hours apart. We speak a different language. Well, sort of. You speak American, I speak English. There's a big pond in between of us that we call the Atlantic. And believe you me, as soon as this COVID is out, I'll be on a plane and we'll be having a proper drink together.
We'll be having tea. We'll be sharing tea time.
We'll do the tea time. We'll do a Neville's Corner meets Ask the CEO in New York, just a live version. So, Avrohom, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know people will be delighted to listen to your insights. You've taken us down a personal journey, so thank you for that, because that's what makes it real. And I look forward to seeing you in person in the not too distant future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Neville, for having me. I really enjoyed it, and it was a great honor as well.
Fantastic. Thanks again.